13 Most Evil Actors in Golden Age Hollywood History. The Golden Age of Hollywood shined with elegance, beauty, and the illusion of perfection. Its stars seemed to embody the very soul of the American dream: grace, charm, and untouchable glamour. But behind those dazzling smiles and studio-polished reputations lurked something sinister. Beneath the glitz and gold lay a world where power meant impunity, where studios buried the truth, and where some of the era's biggest idols lived double lives steeped in cruelty, violence, and corruption. These weren't just flawed men. They were, according to insiders, monsters hiding in plain sight. A former studio publicist once confessed, it wasn't just about hiding scandals or affairs. It was about covering up crimes. Protected by studio contracts and a ruthless code of silence, the worst of Hollywood's elite became untouchable predators, shielded by money and fame. Today, we pull back the velvet curtain to expose 13 of classic Hollywood's darkest figures. Actors whose charm masked depravity, whose power silenced victims, and whose legacies were built not on talent, but on terror. The truth they tried to bury is finally seeing the light. Errol Flynn, the dark side of Hollywood's swashbuckler. Errol Flynn, the man who defined adventure on the silver screen. With his devilish grin, effortless charm, and daring spirit, he became Hollywood's ultimate swashbuckling hero of the 1930s and 40s. But behind the cape and charisma lurked a darkness the cameras never captured. In 1942, that darkness exploded into one of the most scandalous trials in Hollywood history. Flynn stood accused of statutory assault against two underage girls, 17-year-old Betty Hansen and 16-year-old Peggy Satterley. The trial sent shockwaves through the entertainment world, exposing allegations that Flynn used his fame and charm to lure teenage girls into dangerous situations. Courtroom testimony painted a chilling picture: a man who isolated young women, plied them with alcohol, and used his physical dominance and celebrity status to intimidate them. Yet, despite the disturbing details, Flynn walked free, not because he was proven innocent, but because his fame shielded him like armor. And like Flynn became a twisted catchphrase, a mocking reminder of how easily charm could triumph over justice. Rather than retreating in shame, Flynn embraced his notoriety. He laughed off the accusations, turning the scandal into part of his legend. Behind the smirk was a man unrepentant, a predator who reveled in the very infamy that should have destroyed him. Errol Flynn's story is a haunting reminder of how Hollywood's golden light often casts the darkest shadows. To millions, he remains the dashing hero who swung from ropes and kissed the girl. But to those who look closer, he was something far more sinister, proof that charisma can conceal corruption, and that in old Hollywood, fame could buy forgiveness. Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby, America's cruel father. He was the voice that defined Christmas, the man whose calm smile and buttery baritone made him America's favorite dad. But behind the microphone and movie screens, Bing Crosby's home life was anything but merry. His children would later describe a world of fear, pain, and perfection demanded at any cost. To the public, he was the symbol of warmth and family. To his sons, he was a cold, controlling tyrant. Presented as America's Christmas dad, but behind closed doors, he was cruel and violent, said one journalist who spoke with members of the Crosby family. In 1983, Gary Crosby shattered the nation's illusion with his memoir, Going My Own Way, revealing a childhood ruled by military discipline, daily humiliation, and the sting of his father's belt, wrapped in a towel to hide the marks. According to Gary and his brothers, their father enforced weekly weigh-ins, punishing any gain with brutal beatings. The physical pain was only part of it. Bing's words cut even deeper. Constant criticism, icy silence, and unreachable standards that left lasting scars. Two of his sons would later end their own lives. Lindsay in 1989 and Dennis in 1991, each struggling with the trauma, addiction, and despair rooted in those early years. The cruelty was made even more haunting by the hypocrisy. While the world saw Bing Crosby as the perfect patriarch singing of peace and joy, His own children lived in a nightmare of control and emotional deprivation. Those cozy family Christmas specials America adored? Gary said they were often filmed right after violent outbursts at home. The boys were forced to smile, performing a lie for millions. The tragedy of Bing Crosby isn't just the darkness that hid behind his charm. It's how completely America believed the illusion. The man whose voice once brought comfort to millions left behind a legacy of pain, proving that even the brightest stars can cast the darkest shadows. Kirk Douglas. Kirk Douglas, Hollywood's untouchable predator. On screen, he was the embodiment of honor, grit, and courage, the man who stood for what was right. But behind the camera, the legend takes on a far darker tone. According to multiple sources and investigative reports, the real Kirk Douglas used his fame and influence to indulge behavior that shattered the heroic image he built on film. For decades, whispers followed him, none louder than the harrowing allegation that he raped a 15-year-old Natalie Wood. Her sister, Lana Wood, later broke her silence, publicly declaring that Natalie confided the assault had taken place at the infamous Chateau Marmont Hotel. It wasn't a secret affair. It was, she said, a violent attack that left her sister broken and terrified. And that wasn't the only story. Throughout his career, Douglas developed a reputation within Hollywood's inner circles for predatory behavior toward women, a reputation the public never saw. Film historians and actresses from the era described a man who crossed lines without hesitation, from lewd remarks to physical intimidation. These accounts were quietly buried by studio fixers, determined to protect one of their most bankable stars. What made Douglas's alleged actions so disturbing was not just the nature of the accusations, but the system that allowed him to remain untouchable. As one of Hollywood's most powerful actors and producers, he was shielded by fame, wealth, and the machinery of an industry built to protect its own. He was too valuable to lose, one former studio executive admitted. No one dared challenge him. The women knew. Speaking up meant career suicide. The Kirk Douglas story is more than one man's alleged sins. It's a chilling reflection of how old Hollywood operated, a world where power excused cruelty and silence was the price of survival. The fact that these allegations stayed buried for half a century shows just how deep the rot ran, and how far Hollywood would go to protect its golden idols. Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle. Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle wasn't just another comedian. He was one of Hollywood's first superstars, a man whose laughter lit up the silent screen, whose fame rivaled Chaplin himself. But in September 1921, that laughter turned to infamy. Inside the luxurious St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco, Arbuckle threw what was supposed to be a wild Hollywood party. Hours later, 25-year-old actress Virginia Rappe lay screaming in agony. 4 days later, she was dead. The official cause was peritonitis from a ruptured bladder, but rumors spread like wildfire. Whispers of a drunken assault, of unspeakable acts committed behind locked doors. Newspapers devoured every sordid detail, painting Arbuckle as the monster of Hollywood. He was charged with manslaughter, accused of using a foreign object to assault Rappe, a claim so scandalous it shocked a nation that had barely begun to understand celebrity. For months, the trial consumed America. Each headline grew darker, each testimony more lurid. Film reels of his past comedies were pulled from theaters, his name scrubbed from posters. 3 trials followed. 2 ended in hung juries. The third acquitted him completely, so decisively that the jury issued a written apology. But it was too late. The man who once made the world laugh became the face of Hollywood's moral decay. Historians later said his fall marked a turning point, the birth of Hollywood's obsession with image control. Studios realized that their stars' private lives could destroy empires overnight. And so began the era of strict morality clauses, publicity management, and the carefully crafted illusion of glamour. Fatty Arbuckle's scandal wasn't just one man's downfall. It was the moment Hollywood learned that fame could be fatal. Robert Mitchum, the original Hollywood rebel. Robert Mitchum wasn't just playing the tough guy. He was the tough guy. On screen, he exuded danger, mystery, and an effortless cool that audiences believed because, deep down, it wasn't an act. Off camera, Mitchum's life mirrored his roles: reckless, unpredictable, and often explosive. He was arrested for marijuana possession in 1948, a scandal that could have destroyed his career. But instead, it only made him more magnetic, Hollywood's outlaw with a cigarette in hand and a smirk that dared anyone to challenge him. Behind the studio-crafted image, though, was a far darker story. Insiders whispered about his volatile temper, his violent outbursts toward lovers and crew members, and his troubling relationships with very young women. One film historian later revealed, Mitchum didn't just act intimidating. He was intimidating. Those who worked with him recalled scenes that turned from creative disputes to genuine fear. Yet the Hollywood machine knew how to spin chaos into gold. Publicists carefully curated his bad boy reputation, giving audiences just enough scandal to make him thrilling, while burying the rest. They let him be dangerous, but never too dangerous, one insider said. In truth, the studios had perfected the art of selling rebellion while protecting the guilty. Mitchum's legacy is a haunting reminder of how easily Hollywood blurred the line between character and reality. His tough guy charm wasn't just cinema. It was a reflection of something deeply real, deeply flawed, and perhaps too authentic for comfort. Watching him, you couldn't always tell where the acting stopped and the man began, and maybe that's what made him unforgettable. Sterling Hayden, the colleague who named names. Sterling Hayden made his name playing men of principle, unyielding, honorable, the kind who'd face down danger rather than betray a friend. But off-screen, life dealt him a cruel twist of irony. In the shadow of the McCarthy-era witch hunts, the man who embodied integrity found himself cornered by fear. When the House Un-American Activities Committee came knocking, Hayden broke. Under the suffocating pressure of the blacklist, he chose survival over loyalty. In 1951, before the unblinking glare of whack, Hayden confessed to once being a member of the Communist Party, and far worse, gave up the names of colleagues who had attended meetings with him. Those names became casualties of politics, added to a blacklist that destroyed careers and shattered lives. His testimony was devastating, noted one film historian. Coming from a decorated war hero and respected actor, it gave legitimacy to a witch hunt. Overnight, friends became outcasts. Some never worked again. Years later, haunted by guilt, Hayden called his decision the worst thing I ever did, worse than anything I saw in combat. The words carried the weight of a man who had faced the horrors of war but couldn't escape the battlefield in his conscience. His remorse was real, his regret unending. Sterling Hayden's story stands as a brutal reminder of how fear can corrupt even the most steadfast souls. In an age when moral courage came at the highest cost, Hayden faltered and paid for it with a lifetime of regret. His legacy remains a cautionary tale that true integrity isn't tested in comfort, but in crisis. Charlie Chaplin, the genius with a dark shadow. Charlie Chaplin, the man who made the world laugh, also carried secrets that made many recoil. On screen, he was the little tramp, the symbol of innocence, resilience, and hope. But off-screen, his life told a much darker story. Behind the bowler hat, and Kane was a man with a disturbing pattern, one drawn to very young women, often barely out of childhood. Chaplin married several underage girls, one as young as 16 while he was 35, one biographer revealed. His first wife, Mildred Harris, was just 16 when they wed in 1918. 6 years later, his second wife, Lita Gray, was only 15 when their affair began, 16 when they married, and pregnant. To avoid a potential statutory charge, Chaplin chose the altar over accountability. But the scandals didn't stop there. Multiple paternity suits, accusations of manipulation, and tales of exploitation followed him like a dark cloud. The most infamous came in 1943 when actress Joan Barry accused him of fathering her child. Even though blood tests proved he wasn't the biological father, the court ignored the science and forced Chaplin to pay child support. His reputation, once golden, was now tarnished. As public outrage grew, so did government scrutiny. The FBI took notice, branding him a man of immorality and suspicious political views. In 1952, when Chaplin sailed to London for a film premiere, U.S. Attorney General James McGranary revoked his re-entry permit, effectively exiling one of Hollywood's founding icons. Decades later, his artistic brilliance continues to shine, but the moral shadows remain. Chaplin's genius gave birth to cinematic art, but his personal life exposed the contradictions of a man whose laughter masked disturbing truths. History remembers him as a legend, but behind the laughter was a legacy few dare to confront. William Talman. William Talman, the man America knew as Perry Mason's noble district attorney, lived a life far more complicated than the one he portrayed on screen. As Hamilton Burger, Talman embodied integrity, persistence, and an unshakable moral code, even when he lost every case to Mason. But behind the polished image of television's honest prosecutor lay a scandal that would shatter his career and the illusions of early Hollywood's moral order. On March 13, 1960, police stormed a Hollywood home and found Talman among a group of guests in various states of undress, with drugs, alcohol, and allegedly underage attendees present. The story exploded across headlines. Television's righteous DA caught in what reporters called a moral scandal. The network acted swiftly. CBS suspended Talman, citing the wholesome reputation of Perry Mason, a show built entirely on the values of justice, virtue, and clear moral lines. Even though the charges were later dismissed, the damage was done. His reputation, once sterling, lay in ruins. Industry insiders recalled how the incident drove him into isolation and substance abuse. For an actor whose on-screen persona symbolized decency itself, the hypocrisy was too heavy to bear. His wholesome image was a total lie, one biographer later wrote. The Talman case became a cautionary tale about the fragile line between fiction and reality, and how television's heroes were often nothing like the men who played them. For audiences of the 1960s, it was a devastating revelation. The man they trusted as a symbol of moral authority had fallen from grace, exposing the cracks beneath Hollywood's golden facade. In the end, William Talman's downfall wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a mirror reflecting the cost of maintaining the illusion of perfection in a world built on appearances. Tyrone Power, the matinee idol's dark side. Tyrone Power wasn't just a Hollywood heartthrob. He was the matinee idol of the 1930s and 40s, the face every studio wanted and every audience adored. With his striking looks, magnetic charm, and effortless sophistication, he defined the romantic leading man. But behind that polished image was a side of Power that the public never saw, one so disturbing it could have destroyed his entire career. According to several accounts that surfaced only after his death, the Hollywood legend led a dangerous double life. Public matinee idol, private predator, one historian explained. While 20th Century Fox marketed him as the perfect gentleman, handsome, gallant, irresistible to women, those within the inner circles of Hollywood whispered about a far darker truth. Behind closed doors, Power's private life reportedly involved secret relationships with underage girls and young male assistants. His marriages and public romances weren't always acts of love. They were strategic moves, carefully arranged to maintain his image as the dream lover every woman wanted. Meanwhile, the studio's powerful publicity machine went into overdrive, protecting him at all costs. Decades of abuse were quietly erased, one journalist revealed. Fox had entire teams, fixers, lawyers, and publicists, whose sole purpose was to ensure the world never saw the truth. They paid off accusers, invented alibis, and staged photo ops with glamorous women to drown out the whispers. For the studio, Tyrone Power wasn't just a man. He was an investment, a symbol of perfection they couldn't afford to tarnish. And in protecting him, they revealed just how deep Hollywood's machinery of deception truly ran. His story isn't just about one fallen idol. It's a haunting reminder of how the golden age of Hollywood built its legends not on truth, but on carefully managed lies. George Jessel, the comedian time forgot. Once a beloved vaudeville performer and the self-proclaimed Toastmaster General of the United States, Jessel's rise reflected an era when showmanship and shock humor ruled the stage. But as the world changed, he refused to change with it. What began as edgy wit eventually curdled into offense. He became a man out of time. A cultural historian noted, a relic still cracking jokes from a past America that no longer existed. While many of his peers evolved with shifting social attitudes, Jessel clung to routines built on racial caricatures and cruel stereotypes. Even in the 1970s, long after the civil rights movement reshaped public consciousness, Jessel continued spewing language that shocked audiences and humiliated networks. By then, his name appeared on an informal do not book list, a performer too risky, too offensive, too unwilling to adapt. What made Jessel's downfall especially tragic was that his words weren't just part of an outdated act. They reflected his own convictions. He mocked civil rights leaders, praised oppressive regimes, and made statements that betrayed both his heritage and humanity. Despite being Jewish, he defended governments known for anti-Semitism simply because they aligned with his politics. Jessel's story became a cautionary tale, a symbol of how fame built on ignorance eventually collapses under the weight of progress. In the end, he stood alone, a man whose laughter had turned to echoes, left behind by the very audience he once commanded. His fall also mirrors a larger truth about Hollywood's golden age, a time when charm, power, and profit masked a darker machinery of silence and protection. Behind the glamour, studios shielded stars from scandal, erased wrongdoing, and manufactured illusions to protect their investments. The same system that created legends also concealed monsters. Jessel was just one of many, proof that talent could be celebrated even when compassion and conscience were nowhere to be found. In the bright lights of old Hollywood, some jokes went too far, and some stars never found their way back from the darkness they created.